Alive on the MOUNJARO, it's on the pen alive, with your host David Knapp.
Thank you, Clap Track, and happy Thursday night. Welcome to On the Pen Live. I'm your host, Dave Knapp, ManOnMounjaro. That's why I'm here. You are on the pen. Wegovy, Sextenda, Victoza, Trulicity, Mounjaro, Zepbound, that pen. That's why you're here, but most of all, you're here for the community. And for my money, this is the best GLP-1 community out there. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being the best part of what we do. We've got a great show tonight. So welcome. Thank you for being here. We've got an amazing guest tonight from a telehealth juggernaut, one of the first, if not the first, big household name in telemedicine, way before everybody was getting into it, Ro. And the CEO and co-founder, Zachariah Reitano, has joined us tonight. He's going to be our special guest. So glad to have him tonight. And of course, we've got a rhythm and a rhyme to the show. And we're going to get started with just a wee bit of housekeeping. You want mint for pillow? Housekeeping is the time where we share a little bit about what's going on in the world of Dave Knapp, in the world of the channel. And you know what's going on here. It's crazy. It's crazy in the Knapp household. Wife's down with a broken leg. We got summertime hitting. We actually, the biggest part of the On the Pen news that I wanted to share with you this week is we'll be off next week. The reason that we're off next week, and some of you have been checking in with me on this, I appreciate all of you who do. My oldest son, Sawyer, will be having surgery at the University of Iowa hospitals and clinics next week. And because we will be out of town with our little guy, there will be no show next week. So this will be the first week in many weeks that we've taken the week off. And just appreciate all your thoughts and prayers as we enter into this surgery with the little guy. And so I appreciate all of your thoughts and prayers there. I appreciate your continued thoughts and prayers for my wife as she continues to heal from the broken leg that she's dealing with. It has been a crazy, crazy few weeks as we adjust to life with mom who can't get around the house too well. Kids are off school. She's off school. So we're hitting a new stride in the Knapp household. So all good things. So appreciate all your thoughts, all your prayers. And many of you have sent many kind words and even Venmos. And thank you all for that. I really appreciate it. This is the best community. We've got some OGs in the house. Mrs. Bell, I see you. Thanks for being here. It's good to have you here. Sue the Dude, thank you for being here. So that's the housekeeping this week. We're going to keep the show moving tonight because we've got such an amazing guest, and I don't want to waste a ton of time. But one last little bit of housekeeping would be that the podcast this week. Great job on the likes, comments, shares. Thank you for all your support on that one. We hit the top 50 this week again, but you know the goal is to get back into that top 20 and ultimately into the top 10. So if you have enjoyed the podcast, it's a weekly dose podcast that drops every Tuesday. Right. And if you're a member on the YouTube channel, which you see down below scrolling, you can catch that link in the description of this video. If you're a member on the channel, you get the actual video to the podcast a couple days before everybody else does. And so a little perk for the members. But if you do enjoy the podcast, make sure you go over to wherever you get your podcast, give it a 5-star rating and review. That is really helping. We just started in June and already we got as high as number 12th in the country. And again, number 1 is like Peter Attia, right? And you go down that list and you got Dr. Paul Saladino, and then you've got RFK Jr., and then you've got ya boy. So that's you. Thank you, community, for really rallying around the podcast and helping to support that. It has been an awesome journey to add that into the fold, into what we're doing here at On the Pen. We got Join Fridays in the house. Thank you for being here as well. I know that you are keenly familiar with the struggles of having young children that are sick and have to get good medical care. And thank God for good medical care. And he's getting it. And I hope that you're getting the same for your sweet little daughter there. So thank you for being here. Join Fridays. So let's keep this thing moving, right? Enough about me. Let's talk about what's fresh in the world of GLP. About 80 things we could talk about this week. And we covered a bunch of it on the podcast this past week. And so it's kind of hard to pick what is, going to be the biggest story. But I suppose, one of the most interesting things to me that is happening right now in the world of GLP-1s, in this past week, you saw that Nestle came out and they've got their basically their protein fortified, their magnesium, potassium fortified foods that are coming out for convenience sake, targeted to those with GLP-1s. And many people have sort of asked me over the past couple of weeks, like, what do you think of this? Isn't this just like turning junk food into marketing gimmicks? And, here's the deal. I think we live in an era and a time where we've got sort of this weird false dichotomy that either you either have to fix the food in the country or you have to medicate people. And the reality always lies somewhere in between there. And so I think anytime you see big food, which isn't going away anytime soon, right? Anytime you see big food sort of identify, even if it's opportunistic, if you see them identify a need and start to come out with products that actually do have a higher nutritional value, I think that's actually a win. And I think that that's an exciting development when you think about, the food environment that has contributed largely to the epidemic of obesity, not only in the United States, but it's spread throughout the world, right? These companies are global. And so when you think about fortifying these convenience foods in a world where, let's face it, we need convenience. Like today, my day started at 6 o'clock in the morning. I worked all day. I drove all over the state of Iowa. I came back home. I shoved some food in my mouth, took my boys to baseball practice, came back home, helped get all 4 kids to bed, and came down here to do OnThePen. Like, where is the time in there to cook a healthy meal, right? And so you're going to rely on foods of convenience. And so if we can find ways, in your host's humble opinion, my bad, we're going to do what's fresh again, to fortify foods that have a higher nutritional quality to them, I think that's a win. And so that's my opinion about what's fresh this week. Holy smokes, Donna with a $49.99 super chat. Thank you so much, Donna. Appreciate you contributing to OnThePen tonight and every week. Thank you so much for the gifts. It's so generous, and I so appreciate it. Thank you, Donna. Thank you for being for one of the best parts of this channel. Thank you for all your contributions. So let's keep things rolling. We're going to take out the trash. This used to be Fake News Friday. Now it's Take Out the Trash Thursday, because it literally reminds me, hey, trash goes out on Thursday night. So after this deal tonight, I'll remember I got to roll the trash can out to the street. But we're going to take out the trash, and we got a little bit of an interesting topic. All right, so everybody who makes content in GLP-1s was all over the South Park train this week. And everybody's like, Dave, why haven't you done your South Park video? So here's the deal. My biggest issue with the South Park episode, if you didn't get the chance to see it, South Park did a social commentary about the obesity epidemic in this country and the usage of GLP-1s to treat it, not only from a treating obesity side, but even delved into topics of people using it for vanity. Delved into the topics of compounding. It was actually really cleverly done. It did have like this aroma of like ChatGPT just wrote this whole episode, but the episode had some good stuff in it. My biggest issue with the episode was that Cartman was not an avid watcher of OnThePen. That is my biggest takeaway from the South Park, is that there was no scene of Cartman in the chat dropping super chats to your boy. That was my biggest issue with it. If you haven't checked it out, it might be worth checking out. If you do not like coarse language, if you do not like vulgarity, it is not going to be for you. Just full stop. That's what they do over there. It sort of appeals to the lowest common denominator sometimes in humor, but always they have a pretty interesting take on things that go on in society. And so this was no different of, classic South Park, right? So that's my take on it. I didn't want to waste my breath on a whole big long video about it. It was interesting. Check it out if it's for you. If you do not like that type of language, vulgarity, it's probably not going to be for you. All right, I can take a breath. We got through it in record time, 10 minutes. This usually takes me about 20 minutes. I use a lot more words, but I'm excited to bring in our guest tonight. We have a very special guest tonight. I think I told you at the top, but I'll tell you again. Zachariah Reitano, and Zach was a co-founder and is the CEO of Ro. Now, if you're not familiar with Ro, but you've watched my channel this past week, you saw a video that I put out about a new tracker. It is a GLP-1 supply tracker, and that was the brainchild of our guest that's coming up here. And basically, it's just a crowdsourced way to tell where sort of the hot spots for the GLP-1 medications are in the country. You can go there, you can report on whether you found your medication or did not find your medication, and then get alerts as to when that medication starts popping up in your area again. So a really cool tool. And here tonight to talk about it is tonight's hot channel. We'll bring him in here after I roll the bumper.
Hot channel.
Z, welcome to OnThePen, buddy. How are you tonight?
Thanks for having me. I'm great. And it's been awesome to watch the show, watch the chat on the side. You have a wonderful community. Excited to be here.
Awesome. Yeah, it is second to none. The folks that show up every week, it never ceases to amaze me. The amount of people that show up and how religiously people show up, and then just the information that gets exchanged within the chat. Like a lot of times what I'll have to do is I'll have to go back during the week and I'll watch it, but I don't really watch it. I watch the chat, and it has a life of its own, right? Whatever's going on.
I'm watching it going back and forth, and they're chatting with each other, supporting one another. It's amazing what you've built.
Yeah, it is amazing. And I always say, like, to the subscribers of the channel, to those who are members of the channel, however you interact with this channel, you're the best part of it. Like, this doesn't happen without you all. So thank you all for being here. And that's why I was so excited, Z, when you all reached out and said, we got a tool, check it out. Right. And that was really what it was. You're like, this is sort of my pet project. And it's like just a cool little tool. Tell us about like what drove you to create this tool, and a little bit about how it works.
Yeah, absolutely. So it was me and a few other rowers. To your point, it was really a nights and weekends project, and it was a passion project. So, it came from a few different sources. So it came from talking to Ro actually over the last 4 years has helped several 100,000 patients start their obesity journey and their weight loss journey. And so I talk to patients constantly, and I want to know how their experience is going, everything that's going well, but even more importantly, everything that's going poorly, and how we can improve our products and services. And we kept hearing over and over again, and I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir here, just the burden and the hunt every single month to find supply. 10, 12, sometimes 50, 100 pharmacies, driving 30 minutes, an hour, 3 hours, 5 hours. So it came from talking to a lot of our patients. Seeing actually the wonderfully generous community on Reddit that sort of tried to use the tools that were available, from subreddits to spreadsheets, to do this, to share where people found supply. So whenever you can see people that are trying to use the technology in a way that it wasn't actually intended, but they're using it in very clever ways, that's usually a really great source for inspiration, to see if you could solve a problem. And then on the personal front, my dad has been he started on Ozempic. He's now on MOUNJARO, but he's been on medication for 2 years, just over 2 years at this point, actually, maybe about 3. And it's radically changed his life, and he's sort of the quintessential story here. And he's a physician as well. And I saw him he went without medication for about 3 to 4 weeks. And a lot of the wins that he saw And the food noise came right back. And it really took a toll, both the level of anxiety around searching and calling for pharmacies, but also the impact that it has on his life, on his day-to-day life. And so I've always sort of grown up and believed that the best way to complain is to build something better. And so a few rowers, again, nights and weekends, started building this. And I think that the really interesting thing to me about the tool, and happy to explain how it works. And I think, was reading the comments on your video, and I think a lot of members of your community had really great feedback. But one of the most interesting things to me about the tool is that it shouldn't exist, right? It shouldn't need to exist in the first place. What we're talking about is like a basic inventory management tool where what it does, and I'll explain what it does, and then I'll explain sort of how it works outside of healthcare, which won't be a surprise to anyone. But right now, how it works is patients can come on, and it has two primary use cases. The first thing that is exactly as you said, it lets people hopefully crowdsource supply. So people can come on and they say, I need supply. They say the drug, the dose, the zip code that they're in their email, or they can say, I found supply. And they list the pharmacy that they found it in, the drug, the dose, and their email. If someone says they found supply within 100 miles of someone who said they needed supply and the exact drug and dose match, then we'll notify them with the pharmacy name, the Google Maps link, and the phone call so that they can transfer their prescription to that pharmacy. So hopefully it's allowing people to crowdsource. And it does it in batches twice a day. So because we want to be able to really group the pharmacies if there are multiple pharmacies nearby to allow someone to call. And it also does it with a little bit of a look back window of about 48 hours. So if you were to sign up and say you needed supply, but 2 hours before someone said they found it nearby, you're still going to be notified about that supply. Okay. The biggest thing that it does is it really enables people to share what they need and what they found and hopefully create as many matches as possible. The second thing that it does is it allows patients to automatically submit the shortage information to the FDA. So in process of adding themselves to the supply list, they are also able to, if they check a box on the submission form, contribute that same exact information to the FDA, which will let the FDA know the drug dose the patient's looking for and their zip code so that the FDA can get as much real-time information about real life lived experiences of patients. Because, as I'm sure many people have experienced here, we have seen a little bit of a mismatch between what's listed as available and what we actually see from our patient population. And so what we're trying to do is share as much information with the agency as possible to give them as much information in real time that we get to help them. And I think that hopefully it's able to do that. And we've already been able to submit thousands of reports to them. So that's what the tool does. The inspiration was our own patients on Reddit and in the community. And then, I also saw it up close and personal with my dad. He's sort of the inspiration for Ro in general. He's a physician and he saved my life many times. And he's just been an amazing healthcare provider, right? What we talk a lot about at Ro, and really what we're trying to build is this concept of goal-oriented healthcare. So when your dad's your doctor, they care about your health, but they care about your health in service of you living a happy and fulfilled life. So he was the inspiration of both Ro in general and this passion project, this tool.
Yeah, very cool. I think one of the coolest features that I think that people don't realize, obviously, that you built into this, but the people don't realize has existed, but it's buried within the cumbersome FDA website, is the ability to report that you cannot find your medicine. And I know that you touched on it when at the height of the really bad shortages back in like March. I had built a whole TikTok. Basically, my biggest videos were always like, this is the FDA dropped this update today, and here's what the FDA is saying, and sort of explaining that when the FDA reports a shortage, it's at the manufacturer level, like it's, manufacturer, distributor, pharmacy, like there's layers here. And just because you can't find it at your pharmacy doesn't mean that it's in shortage. When it's up there, it's a big problem, and it's probably going to trickle down over time. But the fact that there was such a mismatch between what people were experiencing, I sort of lost faith in that whole system. And then I realized, oh, there's a way that we can actually put pressure on these pharmaceutical companies by reporting our own shortage. And so what Z and his team have done here, that's sort of like maybe like low key one of the coolest features, is that you automatically submit those shortage reports right to the FDA, so that hopefully that tool that the FDA has, becomes a little bit more accurate, and, we can regain a little bit of trust back in that tool.
Yeah, I think that's right. That was the hope, right? The hope was in process of your being able to add yourself to a list just with a simple checkbox, and hopefully to be able to sign up to either say, I found supply or I need supply. It takes 30 seconds or less. And so the hope was to really just reduce the friction. As you said, I mean, your day started at 6 a.m. You drove all around the state of Iowa. You coached your kids, baseball practice. You don't have like 5, 10, 30 minutes to report a shortage. Right. But you can do it in 30 seconds. So I think that was really the hope, is to just try and take as much. What we always try to do is we try to just take as much of the burden off of patients as possible throughout their journey. So yeah, this was one where, again, I think everyone here wants the shortage to end as quickly as possible. And then I think secondarily, we also just want the shortage list to be as accurate as possible, because what we've seen is a lot of providers and patients, but a lot of providers will choose and navigate a treatment plan based on that list. So if they see that it's listed, a specific dose is listed as available, they're more likely to write that prescription for patients under the assumption that they'll be able to get it easily. Right. Exactly. And I think that's not something that we saw. And so that was also one of the things that we wanted to do, at no fault of the FDA's. They need the information. So to your point, right, I do think while we might not see an immediate impact from the submission of the shortage, this does give a voice to millions of patients across the country to share that information. And I think over time that makes a difference.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, the other thing that it really does for us as patients is when you talk about, and I know that you touched on this briefly, but this was one of the things that I have been sort of clanging the drums about when the Release the Vials campaign is, there are people that are calling hundreds of pharmacies a day, right? Yeah. So if you're one of those people who are calling pharmacies 100 times in a day to try to find your fill, this tool is going to be ultimately a really big time saver for you, because ultimately you can get pinged when it's popping up in your area. And if it's popping up in your area, it means that the distributors in your area are able to get it to the pharmacy. So while you may not find it at that exact pharmacy, even the pharmacy that you normally use, you may have a higher probability of calling them and having them be able to pull it up on their screen and say, we can get it now.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think the fascinating thing for me is, like, I am genuinely surprised that this doesn't exist at the pharmacy level. Right? Like when we look at other industries, when you look at Best Buy, you go to Best Buy's website, it'll say if it's in stock, and it'll say how many are available. So you know the urgency, whether it'll just say in stock or it'll say 3 available, like come quickly. And you can, that allows you to see it. The challenge right now is, one, like, it's very surprising that pharmacies don't have that, because everyone is making a bunch of calls. And that is not a good use of patients' time. If you and I are both calling and we're both making 10 calls to the same pharmacies, we're double calling. So we're making 20 calls to 10 pharmacies. That's a giant waste of time. It's a giant waste of time for pharmacists, right? When to just pick up and basically be inventory management spokespeople. And the biggest thing to me is, like, this is a very solved problem in other industries. It should exist. So my hope is this, to me, like, my biggest hope for this tool is that it provides tremendous value during the shortage, but becomes as useless as, like, it becomes useless 2-3 years from now because the shortage is over, because some of these things exist. So, I think that I'm hopeful that pharmacies can get can add this inventory management system. They did it during COVID, so we know that it's possible, right? You saw pharmacies during COVID say, we have the vaccine, we don't. We have supply, we don't. And
were they doing it just like on an individual pharmacy level, or was there like a? Okay.
No, you'd schedule it at specific pharmacies. The
cynic in me goes, well, the reason they don't want to do it is because so many of the pharmacies are owned by the PBMs, and they don't want to fill these medications. And we see the PBMs bend over backwards to not fill these medications. So it's like the shortages are the best thing that ever happened to these PBMs in a way, because they can sort of stonewall filling a script. And, I'm just like, think about like how much money a PBM saves just by dragging you through the process for a few weeks, right? Yeah. You extrapolate that over millions of patients and 3 weeks per patient to get everything in order to fill your medication. They've saved themselves a whole pile of money. So they're experts in delaying and stalling and blocking us from getting our medications, which is a whole nother topic.
Completely. And to your point, we could go down a massive multi-hour sort of rabbit hole about the incentives in the healthcare system, but I'll try to like keep this one as brief as possible. But if we zoom out to your point, a lot of the PBMs are owned by insurance companies. About 80% of the PBM volume is actually owned by the 3 largest insurance companies. And generally speaking, insurance companies, what's interesting is, and people say generally they don't want to cover anything. And the truth is that really what insurance companies don't want is surprise costs, but they actually really like predictable increases in healthcare costs, because they want to make more money. They want to make more profit over time. And in order to do that, they need to be able to charge more premiums. So simply put, like the surprise of the rapid demand of GLP-1s is something that, to your point, the delay of both on the PBM side and the insurance side is something that, they really don't, they hate surprise costs, because they've already accepted a fixed dollar amount on the premium side. What I'm very hopeful of, and we were talking a little bit about this, is we have seen coverage improve over the last 2 to 3 years, and hopefully even more with the expansion of the label and the breadth of the label increasing, and which will emphasize and improve like the ROI of covering these products. But the reason behind the increase in coverage is actually less the ROI, because the drugs have stayed the same price, and far more actually advocacy from communities like yours and others. It's the attention that people are placing on the space and on the product and on the condition that is leading to that rapid increase in coverage. So, we saw starting in 2023, all federal employees and their families were covered for anti-obesity medication. So it's interesting. It's there's this sort of famous quote: we can often overestimate what we can accomplish in a year and underestimate what we can accomplish in 10. And so communities like yours and the advocacy that y'all are doing, every Facebook post, every TikTok, on Reddit, reporting shortages to the FDA, can be hard to like see the progress day in, day out. But if we zoom out month over month, quarter over quarter, year over year, y'all are making a massive difference in how society is viewing obesity and how they're deciding to cover these drugs and these products. But you're right that in the near term, there is this constant battle with insurance companies and PBMs. And, the experiences that we see some patients go through, it borders on like cruel to see what people do. And, South Park episode that you mentioned, I think that the one link that I kept seeing, that I kept watching, was navigating the insurance system. And it was like,
I want that song to be the opening song to this show now.
Yeah. I mean, it was so funny and painful to watch.
Right.
Anyone who's ever needed an expensive medication, but particularly GLP-1s, it's brutal.
Yeah, it absolutely is. One of the things that you touched on that I want to just sort of dovetail on is, you're like, they like fixed costs. I mean, any business does. No business likes surprise costs. Everybody likes to build a business around something that's predictable, right? If something's going to cost X, you know that you need to sell Y, right? I mean, it's just business. How did Novo Nordisk, how did Eli Lilly, and how did these PBMs ever underestimate what the demand for these drugs could do? Just looking at the numbers, like how was there such, even with Eli Lilly most recently with Zepbound and them saying, well, there's been a 40% increase in demand based upon what we expected. How?
Yeah. I have sort of 2 answers here. And then a third one, which we can actually sort of, I think depends on how much math we want to do on the pod, but we can do it looking forward a little bit. So there's 2 reasons that I think are the case, and neither one is like a great justification. The first is that historically, the market for weight loss or obesity products that were non-prescription were much larger. It was a 70, 80, $90 billion industry versus the prescription weight loss market was like $1 to $3 billion. So very, very small. So there had been no commercial successes that were specifically targeted towards weight loss. So the history of weight loss prescription medication was one of many, many products that had failed or had launched and then had to be withdrawn. And for a wide variety of reasons, people keep asking the same questions, or, are GLP-1s just going to be like one of those drugs like fen and others, right? But we have really rich history and data around GLP-1s. They're not new. They've been around for 18 plus years, and we have really great long-term data. Do we have 50 years of data? No, but we do have almost 2 decades of data at this point. Right. So the first is that there just wasn't any historical precedent. The second was that I think that there was tremendous stigma, and that people didn't view obesity as a disease. And so they didn't think it would get covered. They didn't think we've learned a lot more about the disease itself, but it was one of stigma.
Certainly Novo Nordisk in going through putting semaglutide through the clinical trials, and especially after Saxenda and Victoza, certainly they had to sort of see it to go through developing the next generation of liraglutide, which ultimately was semaglutide. Like certainly they had to see eventually, like the insurance companies will see this as non-cosmetic. I just don't get it.
You'd think so. What's interesting is so Victoza did well. It was $1 billion drug, a quote unquote blockbuster drug. Saxenda didn't do as well as they thought. And then, Ozempic, I really do think that even internally, I think this is one of those things where, to your point, and this is to me like, it is surprising, but there are, pharma companies in general, they are economic animals. They want to make a ton of money, as all pretty much for-profit companies do, right? And different companies do it in different ways. But to your point, the market was so large, the incentives were there. So for them to not do it, they had to have thought in some way, shape, or form that they didn't believe in it. And so I think that they now believe in it because of the excess demand. But I think it would have required such a significant investment ahead of time that it would have been in their mind like they didn't do it. And the really interesting thing, so I think that those are the 2 reasons. When we look ahead, the thing that worries me the most, because we don't have what we talked about like a FIFO system, a first in, first out, but we don't have an easy way for someone to start a drug, whatever it may be, and continue guaranteed access to it. Where if they stopped and you added someone else who was on a wait list and brought them off that wait list, that makes perfect sense, right?
Right.
But right now, having everyone hunt for supply every month is pretty untenable. And the thing that I worry about is when you run the math, I have trouble seeing how this ends in the near term, because API manufacturing facilities generally take about 5 years. Fill and finish take about 3 to 5 years as well. So both these take about 3 to 5 years. And when you look at right now Wegovy production in the US, there are 4 lines making about 20 million pens, or 20 million pens each, which is about 80 million total pens a year for Wegovy. 80 million pens is about 20 million prescriptions, right? Four pens per prescription. 20 million prescriptions over the course of a year is if just about 1.5 million people use the product for an entire year. Now, we know that there's not perfect persistence and there's not a perfect adherence. Let's say there's 50 to 70% churn 12 months out. But when you look at that math, that means that there's only enough Wegovy for 1.5 million to 5 million people. And all of the numbers that you hear in these analyst reports and these earnings reports is, we're going to 5-7x capacity over the next 5-10 years by 2030, let's say.
Yeah.
The challenge with that is if between Lilly and Novo, you have 1 billion or 2 billion pens, you're looking at enough supply globally for 25 to 40 million people. 7 years, for 5-6 years from now. That's just not enough.
Right.
And so, orals will provide some relief because of fill and finish. But orals, if you think about it, it's 50 milligram Wegovy per day, 7 times a week, right? 7 times a week. That's 350 milligrams of Wegovy versus 2.4 in a pen. So you need 145 plus times the amount of the API. So each way you go, though, there are limits with orals, there's limits with pens. It's hard to see how we navigate out of this unless, and what you and I were talking about is there needs to be an acknowledgement of this all hands on deck crisis, right? We need to treat this like a COVID, like an Operation Warp Speed, whatever it may be. But the current situation is really untenable, and it doesn't seem like it's getting better for a few years.
Yeah,
Not to be a very optimistic person, but that we need to solve that somehow.
Yeah, I think we have to be realistic about it. I mean, probably the most repeatable question that I get, again, there's like thousands of people that I interact with on a weekly basis, thousands. And the most common question is, when are the shortages going to end? And they're just simply referring to the FDA list. But it's like Eli Lilly said in their last earnings call, it isn't going to get any better until orforglipron comes out. And orforglipron is not coming until 2026. Now, the win with orforglipron is it's a small molecule, but it's still very complex to manufacture. Like that's one of the things that they also touched on is it's a very complex, small molecules are very complex to manufacture, and peptides are very difficult to make bioavailable when you take them orally. So you need a ton of API to do it. Right. So, I mean, I think even when the orals come out, it's still like in the efficacy. Then you look at the efficacy. So, the good news is that you do have other players coming into this.
You have Amgen coming in, hopefully. You have a few others.
You've got Viking Therapeutics looks really exciting, though I question their ability to actually bring it to market in pens.
They might need a larger partner, to your point. Yeah, they might need a larger partner.
But like there's
Boeing or Ingelheim, you got a few others,
survodutide. We had actually last week our guest, his name is Scott Liberto, and he's in the survodutide trial. And so he was the guest last week. It was really interesting.
Oh, that's awesome. That's really cool.
And interestingly, I've talked to people in the CagriSema trials. The CagriSema pen is actually even more complicated because CagriSema, which is, for those of you watching who don't know what it is, it'll be the next new generation to hit the market from Novo Nordisk. It's cagrilinotide, an amylin agonist, and semaglutide, and they can't combine the medications together, so the pen is dual chambered. So it's an even more complicated pen to make. So it's like that's not what we want to hear.
That's not what we need. Why do you think? And we were talking about this a little bit, but I see some, Allie, Michelle, Anna, a bunch of people, Jennifer, calling for release the vials, and I know that you really led that charge in that hashtag, and then. Why has your community talked about, like, why do you think that they haven't released the vials genuinely? If it's available in other countries, available in Europe, it doesn't seem, I think someone made the comment, I think Michelle, I'd have to go back and read, made the comments around compounding pharmacies. We do compounding. There aren't supply constraints there. So like, I'd just be curious, why you think that we haven't seen them do that.
Yeah, so I mean, our community has had great insights into this. Some of my closest follow the Brain Trust kicks this around a lot. Shout out to Cloakster and Clark Kent, Sue the Dude, and Matt.
I saw Clark Kent in the comments too. It's great.
Yeah, he's a good dude. Really helps with a lot of the news on the pod and everything. But a lot of their thoughts behind why they don't is because. Lilly fears splitting doses, right? Like, so you release a single dose vial in the 15 milligram, and that's a lot of 2.5 doses. You'd be going against the prescribed method of taking it, but we know people will do it there. But my retort to that is like, people, you can go even on YouTube where it's pretty strict about doing stuff like that. Like, people are splitting pens already, sadly. So I think like it's going to happen either way. And like, the reality is, to the numbers you were sharing earlier, I don't think that's the case, because if they can,
they're doing it in Europe, right? They're doing it in other countries,
right? And if they can
manufacture it, people are going to split doses in the U.S. or not do that in the U.S., but it's fine in Canada and Australia. Like, it's interesting, right? Like,
like they're not going to think
still
of the same
exists in other countries,
right? I think if it's to come down to brass tacks, to me, why I don't think they do it is because I think maybe I personally have underestimated the difficulty with the difficulty that it takes to change manufacturing lines to actually do that. But like it is a reality. They would not go through FDA. And think about, like, if folks would just think about for a second, the Zepbound vials were approved in late March. It was brought to market in late November. So they had to start this thing right away. The FDA approval for this right away. Like, they saw it. They saw that they would ultimately need it. So I think they will. But I think, and you're the smart business guy here. Like, I think that there's a right time when the brain trust at Lilly goes, okay, now release them. Like, however that jives, with their financial situation. But I think the reality is, they can, anything that they can manufacture right now, they can sell.
Yeah,
right?
They're both companies are selling every pen they can make, right? But what was very interesting to me, and I think that one of Ro's first principle is fight for patients. We very much, and the word fight is intentionally chosen because you do, if you are trying to build up a products and services for patients, you will have to quote unquote fight against the existing powers that be, or the existing incentive structure, or the existing ways things work, right? We're trying to crowdsource supply here, and basic inventory management should be a really, really solved problem. But both companies are they, to your point, that they're selling every single pen they can make, but they are both, the individual companies are both expressing their own patient centricity in kind of interesting ways. And I'd be curious your thoughts. So you have Novo, who I do think, by choking early supply doses, by choking the 0.25, the 5, and the 1, we have seen patients who are on 2.4 have an easier time. So it is harder to start, but we've seen people who have been able to get up to that maintenance dose before the shortage really took hold. They've been able to maintain easy access to it. And so they've shifted that. So that's one way that I think Novo is aligning itself and showing true patient centricity rather than having more people start the product. On the other hand, it's $1,500. So less patient centric. You have Lilly, who has a more effective drug, and they started it at it's probably a 40% more effective drug, and they started it at 20 to 30% lower price, $1,000 versus $1,500, so a third. And then in addition to that, the savings card's at $550. So tremendous patient centricity in that way, but they haven't limited the number of early doses such that people on the 10 and
quite the opposite. It's quite the opposite.
It's the opposite. So it's interesting, I think, to read a lot of this. To your point, I mean, I think what you and the community do really well is you take the tea leaves and you actually turn them into actionable strategies and pieces of information for patients, from earnings calls to Nestle's new product launches, whatever it may be. But it's an interesting one to sort of see the two approaches of the companies manifest in different ways.
Yeah, that has been fascinating. We've talked about, it's funny. In kind of getting ready for this, I was listening to some of the things that you've done and some of the podcasts you've been on, and I'm like, man, it's kind of like listening to myself, like all the stuff that you geek out about.
I feel the same way. Kindred spirits over here.
But yeah, I really think that the one thing I wanted to add to the advocacy piece and actionable steps, and I will give a shout out to Join Fridays, who's in the chat. They're another telehealth provider. And when you talk about the community and the power of the community and actionable steps, one of the things that we've talked about for like 16 months on this channel is advocating for the passage of the Treat and Reduce Obesity Act. So I feel like anytime we talk about advocacy, it's worth mentioning the Treat and Reduce Obesity Act, which will ultimately, I don't know if the right word is decriminalize Medicare's ability to basically add obesity management medication to their formularies. And we know that typically the way that it works is once the public sector adopts something as a standard of care, the private sector is typically, a little bit behind, but ultimately follows. And so anytime we talk about advocacy, I think it's worthy of mentioning the Treat and Reduce Obesity Act. And I just want to shout Fridays out because they've really led the charge over on TikTok of really bringing that to the forefront of the community. We've talked about it here, but they've made it, a kind of one of their rally points at
I think that's a great call out. And I think Fridays look like I'm a person who I genuinely believe there's not enough digital health companies and providers in the entire U.S. to meet the demand. So I'm not I think that Fridays, great company. They also produce pretty awesome educational content on TikTok. That's been awesome to watch. So I think it's been great. So on the advocacy front, on the education, on the content front, I think they do a really great job. So I admire from afar of Fridays and the team, what they've done.
Absolutely. Likewise. Z. So we've gone for about a little bit over a half an hour, which I told you. So here's what I want to do if you're cool with it. There's just a couple of comments that I thought, I'd like to hear Z's answer to this about kind of going back to the tool that you created, the supply tracker. And I just want to sort of rapid fire kind of get your answers to some of the community questions. If you have a question and you're in the chat tonight, if you have a question for Z about the tracker tool, feel free to drop it in the comments. I'll try to pick them up, but I want to rapid fire just a couple of quick questions if you're cool with it.
That sounds awesome. Yeah.
All right. So number one, this gal wanted to know about Trulicity. So she went through obviously your tracker tool and said, I'm on Trulicity and I don't see this one added. Any chance that you may add Trulicity to that?
This is the feedback we love. So this is great. So we can look towards adding that. So that's great feedback.
Very cool. I'd imagine that wouldn't be a very hard thing for you to do at this point.
Yeah. Once you add one, we can add another. So that's great feedback.
Very cool. All right. So here we go. Here's a couple like boom, boom, one right after another. And look at the hearts on those. So basically, and I could have given other options, but basically between what these two had to say and what others had to say is like, no way am I sharing where I get my stash. Like, how do we overcome that? Like, is there a way to overcome it? Probably not.
So the first thing I would say is I don't blame that person for 1 second. And if they do feel like and everyone here knows, like, to continue to see the benefits, the majority, not everyone, but the majority of people need to continue to use the medication. And so if someone genuinely feels that sharing it would put their future health at risk, totally understand. So that person should not feel guilty about it for 1 second. It doesn't seem like they do with all the hearts, but they shouldn't feel guilty about it for 1 second. The thing that I think does exist, so not on the off the beaten path ones, but on a lot of the majority, the mainstream pharmacies, I think what ends up happening is the supply goes so quickly that if you share where you found it at this CVS on a Tuesday and they have 3 or 4 or 5 boxes, it doesn't decrease your odds of finding it 30 days later. So if there's one thing that I've been wildly impressed and admire about this community, but the obesity community and the GLP-1 community, it is the ridiculous level of generosity, selflessness, and support of one another. From an educational perspective, from a supply perspective, from like what products and services are good, where to find information, what's real, what's not real. The amount of time that people spend, I mean, you're doing this at 9:50 at night on a Thursday. After you put 4 kids to bed, your son's having surgery, your wife just broke her leg. You're doing all of this because of the community, just to continue to support one another, right? So I do think that there is something to, if you feel that you found supply at a pharmacy where the supply will go quickly, so it's going to go in a couple days, it's not going to be there in 30 days, that it's a nice thing just to help someone else find it. Doesn't decrease your odds, but pays it forward. And if everyone did that, right, it's kind of one of those things where it's like, there's a little bit of, there's a little bit of tragedy of the commons potentially. But if everyone shared where they got their supply, I think it would make it easier for everyone to find when they needed it, and reduce the number of phone calls that everyone had to make. But if you have a secret pharmacy that's off the beaten path, I wouldn't stress about it too much. But hopefully, if people are getting it at more mainstream ones where the supply is going quickly, hopefully they can share.
Yeah. And I'll just sort of dovetail on what we talked about earlier too. Like when you think about the supply chain, you've got manufacturers, distributors, pharmacies, and the distributors are very regional, right? So if you're finding it at your pharmacy, that doesn't necessarily mean that the next person who's going to get an email fired off in your area has to look at their pharmacy. Because I think the reality, and some people brought this up, I didn't screenshot it. The reality is that many pharmacies don't keep these medications on hand. Many pharmacies will order them for you, but they all use the same distributors. Like each pharmacy uses a different distributor, but there are only a few, right? And if that distributor in that area has inventory, they can feed that inventory to any pharmacy in the area that uses them, right? They probably have a pecking order to that, but probably FIFO, right? But it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to go wipe out your pharmacy of supply. It just means that they know that, okay, I may be 50 miles away. I'm not your neighbor. I'm not going to go to your CVS, but I'm going to go to mine, because if yours got it, mine probably can too. So just to, kind of dovetail on that a little bit.
Yeah, totally.
All right, so here's the last one, and this was from Clark Kent, and I really respect Clark Kent because he's always got a great angle on things. Like I said, he helps with my podcast. He was a little bit more on the skeptical side too, and so just from a practical standpoint, the first comment is just a little bit more how it works. So you supply an email address when you report the shortage. When somebody reports they have found supply, it sends you an email. You kind of touched on this earlier, but one more time for those in the back.
Yep, that's how it works. So when there's two things as it relates to crowdsourcing. You can either come on and say, I need supply. And when you do, you say the drug and dose and your zip code, and your email to be notified. If you want, you can also check a box and we'll automatically report that shortage to the FDA. So that's what you report if you need supply, your zip code. If you found supply, and ideally, and I think a few people in the chat put this, ideally you share when you found supply, when you did it, so that there's as much real-time information as possible. But you'll enter in your pharmacy. We'll have a autocomplete from Google Maps, but you enter in the pharmacy and the drug and dose that you found. And what we will do is we will take the address of that pharmacy. We'll look at any patient in a 100-mile radius that said that they needed the supply that you found, and we will notify them and send them the pharmacy name, address, phone number, and link to Google Maps so they can see how far it is from them and they can call that pharmacy. So that's how the crowdsourcing works. I did see the email. We're going to add this FAQ question because it is great feedback and it's totally an understandable sort of question, is like, is this just one giant ploy to get emails to sell our compounded?
I heard that one today.
What?
I said, I heard that one today.
Yeah, I saw that as the second comment. And first, I think that's it's a great question. Happy to answer it. So this is how this will work. So the only way that we're going to email someone and share that there are compounded options at Ro is only if two things happen. One, they check a box that says they would like us to do so they opt into it. And the second is only if we haven't found supply within 100 miles of them for an entire week. So our thought process here, and again, totally open to feedback. We could change this, we could update it, but our thought process here is that majority of people, not obviously Saxenda or Victoza, but on the other GLP-1s, the majority of people are on a weekly shot. So if they find supply within that week, or we notify them at least that there's supply, we won't send them an email about ours, and hopefully they have found other treatment. If a week goes by and they haven't, then we'll send them an email. And our thought process here was we'll send them an email saying that we offer compounded. The downside is the person gets another email. If they already have supply, they can ignore it. But the upside is that some people might not, and we wanted to make sure that they knew we had options available. So that was our thought process, totally open to feedback. The main intent of the tool is not to push Ro products. Candidly, there would be a lot easier and better ways to push Ro products than to build a tool for everyone that basically works seamlessly, even if you're not a member. But that was our thought process, but always open to feedback as well.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I appreciate you being willing to address some of those more, sort of, I don't know, I call them naysaying comments. I think it's a fantastic tool. I know that there are people within the community who are like, we need something like this. So I threw sort of some of the more like, good, constructive feedback questions at you. But overwhelmingly, the response that I got to the video that I shared was, this is a long time coming. We've needed a tool like this. This is super cool. Just want to shout out Michelle. Thank you for this $19.99 super chat. Really appreciate you, Michelle Kahn. Thank you so much for that. But yeah, I really got a lot of really positive feedback as well. So I think that it is a absolute excellent tool. I want to just scroll up here, if you'll bear with me for a second, man. Just wanted to make sure that there wasn't any questions that I missed in the chat. I don't think there were.
Well, Deborah asked if there's a charge. It's totally free. It's open access. It's free to use. You don't have to be a Ro customer.
Yeah. So somebody else asked a question too. I think it's important to reiterate. This is for branded medication. It doesn't matter where your prescription comes from. It doesn't matter where you fill your medication. It's just like a heat map, right? Like there's a tool called like Gas Buddy or something, right? That works kind of like this, where you kind of source where the cheapest gas is, right? This is sort of similar, and I think it's worth mentioning for some people. It seems like the idea of crowdsourcing is a little bit missed, and crowdsourcing is like, this tool will become better the more that you use it, right? So right away, like I made a video right away. I was like, this is a really cool tool. And I should have thought in the moment, like I should probably warn people that like, this is the first day it's live. So there's not a lot of information there, right?
We need submissions. We need submissions. Exactly.
Yeah, we need you all to use it. So on that point, Zach, what's been the response? How have people responded so far? Have you gotten a lot?
We've been blown away by the response. As you could probably imagine, there's been far more shortage reports than found supply. But we've already had, if I combine both shortage submissions and supply submissions, we've exceeded 10,000. So we've had thousands of people report. We have sent out, a bunch of emails to people about supply in their area. There is still a significant mismatch, obviously far more shortages, at least if I have to, this is off the top of my head, but if I have to go back and look at the data, but it's more 20 to 1. So like for every 20 people that find or have a shortage, one has found supply. So, hopefully that mismatch, hopefully we can get more and more supply notifications, but I understand it takes time, right? It's only been out for 36 hours. But overall, I think the glass half full, so blessing with all those shortages, is we have passed on, for everyone who checked that box, we have also passed on that information to the FDA. So they're going to see an influx, which I think they appreciate. Everyone that, they do want as much real-time information. That's why they built the tool in the first place, right? We are piggybacking off of the APIs that they've already built. So they want to hear directly from patients. So I think that they're going to be enthusiastic about getting more real-time information about patient experiences.
Random question. Do you think that you're the first company, medical care provider, that has created a tool that links up with that API that they have to
it's a good question.
Kind of connect their reporting tool? I bet you are. I hope that this can serve as maybe a template, not only for the GLP-1 community, but like, we're not the only community that struggles with this. There are people with all sorts of chronic disease, whether it's rheumatoid arthritis or, I especially think you harken back to COVID and the issues there. But like, ever since there, the supply chains have been squirrely with a lot of things. And so I hope that it can, over time, serve a bigger purpose to like, you saw Eli Lilly, right? What did they do with they developed a supply website, right? Extension of their core domain, where it's like, I don't know, supply.lilly.com. All it is just feeding you what's already on the FDA website. But the FDA website is just, let's face it, it's a little bit cumbersome. It's a little bit harder to use, or maybe less approachable. I think I'll say that. It's a little less approachable than a Lilly website or a Ro website. And so I think it's a genius move to incorporate that. Like, again, I said it earlier, I think that's low key one of the coolest things that it does, is report that shortage to the FDA, so that we know that FDA tool can become better. Because it wasn't like 3 months ago that I finally made a video and I was like, don't go to the FDA website anymore. Just watch my channel. If you watch my channel, I'll tell you what people are telling me. And these dosages are in shortage, or soon you're going to see issues with this. And I felt like a little defeated, because it's like, I shouldn't be the best resource for this. But I felt like with all of the feedback I was getting from people, I was like, I can't tell people that it's not in a shortage anymore. Nobody can find the 7.5 anywhere,
Yeah.
So anyway,
we see the exact same thing. But look, like, I think, again, the best way to complain is to build something better, and you and the community are doing just that, right? So you could either have sat there and said, oh, I'm defeated, the FDA website's not accurate, but you didn't. You then said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to take the information that I'm getting from my community, and I'm going to share it with everyone. So again, it's awesome to see, and really appreciate your inviting me on here.
And that's what you did too. So kudos to you and your fellow rowers. Congratulations on launching a really, really cool tool that I think is really helpful for the community. Z, thank you for spending some time with our OnThePen crew tonight. I really appreciate it. I hope you'll come back and do it again sometime. And I hope you enjoyed your time.
Would love that. Would love that. Had a blast. And again, I've learned from you and the community a ton. So it's really great to come on the show and happy to come on anytime. So thanks.
Awesome. Appreciate your time tonight, man. Take it easy.
Have a great rest of your night, and good luck to Sawyer next week.
I appreciate that, man. Take care. Zachariah Reitano, who is the CEO and co-founder of Ro, a very interesting company. If you've never checked out the history of Ro, you really ought to follow them. They were in telemedicine before really anybody got into it. And I remember when they reached out, I was like, man, I can remember the commercials that I first saw with Z and his dad. And I just remember thinking, that is really cool. Y'all know the story about my own dad, who was not a doctor, unfortunately passed away from a heart attack back in 2012. I love to see dads working with their kids to develop new things. You know, that is sort of the loose sort of history of everything that I do here. And so I've told that story before. And so I just thank you, Zach, for being here tonight. And thank you to the whole Ro team. Now, I owe Donna, which I believe gave the biggest super chat of the night. I owe Donna where I'm going to inject this bad girl. So 15 milligrams of MOUNJARO to treat my type 2 diabetes. And if you want to let me know where we're going to inject this thing tonight. But yes, Closer said it used to be Roman. Yeah, I think they did a little rebrand, but yeah, it used to be known as Roman. So you may be more familiar with that, but they're all over. Man, I can't turn the TV on without seeing a Ro commercial, probably more so lately because of my browser history. But yeah, so yeah, check them out. Very, very interesting company, huge company. And what Z has created with his team there has been just amazing. Tummy. All right, so we're going to do the tummy tonight. And thank you again, Donna, for the biggest super chat of the night. Really, really appreciate it. We're going in. All right, 15 milligrams down the tube. We'll see what happens. Hey, I thank you all for being here tonight. I thank you all for supporting the work that we do here at OnThePen. So appreciate it. Thank you for another tongue inject. Yeah, maybe I'll just do a sublingual, right? That's one thing I'd like to get into with Zach at some point down the road, is all these funky presentations that people are coming up with for these medications. But yeah. I really appreciate all your support this week. Again, as a housekeeping note, next week's show will not exist. I'll be on the road with my son having his surgery. Continued prayers for him as he prepares for this. He's my oldest, so he is by nature just the worrier, the thinker, the everything. He's such a good boy, and you hate to see your kids ever struggle with anything, especially health things. But yeah, if you could just be in prayer and give him your thoughts as well this week, as well as my wife. So this wasn't quite the week we had planned out for him. We're like, we're going to go and we're going to do all these things. And now my wife can't really move around. So he's a trooper because he's the firstborn. So thank you all for being here tonight. Thank you for being the best part of what we do here at OnThePen with ManOnMounjaro. I so appreciate each and every one of you. I say it every week and I'll say it again. You're the best part of what we do here. And I mean it. I say it and I mean it. So until next time, which will be after next week, may the Lord bless you and keep you. Make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. And we will catch you on the next stream.